America's the land of opportunity, right? Bankruptcy is here. A lot of countries don't have this option, right?
Yeah.
Other countries, there are debtors' prisons.
Right.
The bankruptcy system gives the honest but unfortunate debtor a fresh start and an ability to live out the American dream again.
Welcome to Money Market, a Bank of Tampa podcast. We highlight the businesses, expert business advice, the local economy, and points of interest in the Tampa Bay market. Follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or pretty much everywhere. Make sure you share this episode with a friend or colleague. I am your host, Owen LaFave, the Pinellas County Market President for the Bank of Tampa, Tampa Bay's oldest and largest community bank. Today's guest is Stephanie Lieb, who serves as the co-leader for the Bankruptcy and Creditors' Rights Practice Group at Trenam Law Group here in Tampa. Stephanie is a board-certified business bankruptcy attorney, a distinction held by fewer than 50 attorneys in the state of Florida. And she is a Supreme Court certified civil mediator. That sounds very impressive. We're talking about the misunderstood topic of bankruptcy, and we're joking beforehand that bankruptcy is not fun, but you're going to make it fun.
We're going to try.
Did you always want to be an attorney?
Not really.
No?
No, I knew I had to go to graduate school. I knew I needed to prolong the college experience a little longer.
What was your undergrad in?
Business.
Okay.
So bankruptcy I fell into it, but it turned out to be
You didn't
a good
have
fit.
a passion for it?
A passion for when I was 19 years old
For
bankruptcy law. Not quite.
Now, bankruptcy is very code-driven, so very detailed.
Yes.
Are you detailed in all aspects of your life?
Yes.
Are you a baker?
I'm not a baker.
Okay.
I'm not a cook, but I think maybe I'm a little bit too much of a perfectionist in a lot of areas of my life. But
so how does that manifest itself? Like, where are you a perfectionist?
In my practice, I think I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. In my home life, I think maybe the details have to be a little too quite right. But
You're micromanaging
I'm
the
working
household.
on it, Owen. I'm working on it.
We're all working on something.
We're all
It's
working
okay.
on something.
So why bankruptcy law? You said you fell into it. So, I mean,
it's an interesting story.
All the other classes were full.
That's right.
Is
That's
that right?
exactly right. So I was in New Orleans for undergrad and law school.
Okay.
And my last year of law school was 2005 when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was. So I came home. I'm from Tampa. I was watching Anderson Cooper on TV, and I said, well, I had better finish law school. So I went to Stetson. It's the closest law school, and they were so kind. And they said, you can come and take whatever classes you want as long as they're open. And shocker, bankruptcy law taught by
There wasn't a line of people
there were openings. And so that's how I fell into it. And I worked for a judge. The judge was the professor.
Okay.
And he kind of took me under his wing and asked me to be his intern and then helped me get a clerkship. So after law school, I clerked for two of the bankruptcy judges in Tampa for a couple of years before I joined Trenam.
Interesting. Were you devastated you couldn't go back to New Orleans?
I was always coming home. It was a devastating situation, of course, but worked out quite well for maybe me being the only one. It worked out well for Hurricane Katrina.
I mean, Stetson's a great school.
It's a great school.
Yes. So, setting the stage, talking about some statistics. So, according to the Admin Office of U.S. Courts, annual bankruptcy filings totaled 504,000 year-ending September, and that's compared to last year, so 433. So that's a year-over-year 16% increase. The average for the past 35 years is 1.6. So people are talking about bankruptcy filings are going through the roof. I know you were sharing with me beforehand. If you look back to 2022, it was like a 64% increase or 65% increase. So that's pretty dramatic, but compared to historical levels, I mean, it's not terrible, but maybe we reached a bottom point and things are turning. But what are you seeing in your practice?
Sure. What I'm seeing in the market is that we are substantially busier than we were really over the last at least decade.
Okay.
Right? I started practicing bankruptcy law right in the crash, 08, 09. Is when I
guess
started.
It was a good time.
It was a great time. We were very
aligned.
busy for bankruptcy. But then there was a lull of a number of years where after all that worked out, which took a number of years to work out, we were pretty slow. COVID was, I think, a little bit of a blip. We got really busy during COVID because of what I term and a lot of people term the retail apocalypse. But that was an aberration. Right, created by the pandemic. And then since then, we've been steadily getting busier. And over the last 2 years, we've gotten a lot busier. And a lot busier with different types of industries, but a lot of small businesses, particularly in the middle of Florida.
Interesting. So, I think what draws everybody attention to bankruptcy is, and especially in that retail place, you're talking about the retail apocalypse. And largely when you look at the retail market, things are relatively good, but there are some big name corporations that have struggled and have filed bankruptcy. I can think of, Red Lobster, Spirit Airlines just recently tried to merge with JetBlue, and that was shut down. Babcock is a local one. That's what, third generation company?
120 years. Yeah.
Been around forever. And I shared this in another episode of a podcast, but maybe there's some validity to it. I had a credit officer. He used to say, we'd present him with a credit, and we're like, this is a third generation company. And he's like, they're that much closer to failure. And I think that one was
such a cynic.
Credit officers.
He's not wrong.
Credit officers
such a cynical view. I love it.
I told that to Andrea Gonspart, that story, and she's fifth generation, and that was her response. Like, you're not wrong. But so she's just trying to preserve everything. But any trends in industries or anything that's broader based that you think is resulting in the there's some economic things which I could guess, but in your opinion, what's going on?
Sure. I think what I can start with is there are certain industries that are just more susceptible to small changes in market conditions. For example, freight and logistics.
Okay.
If gas prices, they've been through a lot. Yellow filed for bankruptcy. Yellow is no longer, right? One of the largest freight operators. KAL just filed. I think a lot of that has to do with leverage. They're over leveraged, but also they're susceptible to small changes in market conditions. If the price of gas changes a couple cents, when you spread that out and that's your whole business, it makes a big impact. Interest rates.
And wages.
Sure.
With them. Wages, insurance.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
All of those things.
Inflation, you mentioned.
Inflation. I think interest rates, when we look at interest rates of the last 5 years, they have, maybe you had a working capital line of credit that you funded your business with that was at prime plus 2. Prime plus 2 5 years ago was half of what prime plus 2 is today. And so if the cost of your money has doubled over 5 years, but your other expenses have increased and your revenue hasn't, you're just squeezed.
You're feeling the pinch. And a lot of those small customers rely on those lines for working capital. And we've got a unique customer base, but what's transpired as interest rates have increased, they've utilized their cash and not utilized their line. But if you're not in a position to do that, all of a sudden your carrying costs, your operating costs, conceivably, with your interest carry, doubled.
Right. Another industry that you look at is that has a lot of failures is restaurants. I think the nature of restaurants is that they have thin margins unless they're selling liquor. They have pretty thin margins. The cost of tomatoes goes up. We've got a problem, right? Wages,
eggs relevant at one point.
Milk, all of those things can impact. And then restaurants also have leases, right? A lot of them lease their space. So, there's not a lot of ability to be nimble in a restaurant. The model kind of is the model. And I think we've seen since COVID, there's been a lot of consumer changes in the way that people eat out. Do they eat out? Do they use Uber Eats? Do they just not go out anymore because they can't afford to, because everything else, inflation's been so high on everything else, they're just not eating out as much. When they do go out, do they have 2 drinks each at dinner or not? So a lot of those things have contributed to some restaurant bankruptcies, I think, all over the country.
Fast casual. So I work in downtown St. Pete mostly. So I manage Pinellas. So I joke that I just circle the Bay, which is not really a joke. It's true. But I will tell you specifically, because I'm in downtown St. Pete so much during lunch, like Monday and Friday, nobody's there. So the hybrid workforce is real. There's no vacancy in downtown St. Pete, but no one comes to the office on Monday and Friday. And if you're a restaurant, that's a big adjustment to your revenue and your earnings that you have to find a way to work through. Your lease doesn't change.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And your overhead doesn't, there's 90% of your overhead doesn't change. Yeah. And can you keep those employees if you can't offer them Monday and Friday?
Right.
It's tough.
It's tough.
So
a lot of numbers in bankruptcy, a lot of exciting numbers, fun, exciting numbers.
So exciting.
But so for people that don't know, there's chapter 7, 11, 13. There's some others, but those are the ones I think probably people know the most.
Sure.
Can you kind of walk us through what those are?
Sure. All right. Ready for bankruptcy basics?
Let's
Here we
go.
go. All right. Chapter 7 is a liquidation. It is available to
going out of business.
Yes, you're done.
Yeah.
It's available to businesses. It's available to individuals. And for businesses, it means a trustee comes in and liquidates all the assets and pays that money to creditors, and it's over. The doors are closed.
The end.
You're done.
Okay.
The end. In a personal Chapter 7, it means you get to keep your exempt assets. Right?
So your home,
your homestead, your
assets.
something like some equity in a car. Maybe if you have an IRA or a 401k, you can keep those things that the state, Florida law has said are exempt. You can keep those things, and then you give up everything else, and you get a fresh start.
Okay.
Okay. So that's kind of a reset button, if you will.
All right.
A Chapter 13.
Control, Alt, Delete.
That's exactly right. And start over, right? Which is the nice thing about bankruptcy. You get a fresh start. Chapter 13 is a little bit different. It is for individuals, only for individuals, and they have to have regular income. But if they do, they have to pledge what they call the net disposable income after payment of normal expenses, not whatever expenses you want, but normal expenses. They dedicate their net disposable income over 3 or 5 years to repaying a percentage to their creditors.
So my annual vacation to Europe.
Not in Chapter 13.
Okay.
So you got to forego that during your plan. And then
my normal expenses.
It's totally normal.
Come on, Judge.
And then you get to, come out of that bankruptcy. And most people use a Chapter 13 to save their home. Right? Because let's say you were 5 payments behind on your home or 15 payments behind. You take those 15 payments, you divide it over a 3 or 5 year plan, and then at the end of the plan, you come out and you're current on your so you get to save your home that way. A lot of people use Chapter 13 that way. And then there's Chapter 11. Chapter 11 is available to individuals, which a lot of people don't know. It's for individuals who are high earners but also have high debt.
Okay.
And it's also what we think of, I think in the news, we think of what Chapter 11 really is. It is a corporate reorganization, right? But it's also not that at all. Right? It is either a reorganization where you try to skinny down your business and come out as a leaner, meaner version of yourself.
Get some debt forgiveness.
Right. Restructuring your debt and getting rid of some leases, those kinds of things. Or it can be a sale. And it can be an orderly sale to maximize the value of the business, either selling the business as a whole or selling, let's say, an arm of the business that, we try to do brick and mortar and we try to do online retail, and one of those isn't working. Let's sell one off and let's keep one. So you can do a lot of different things in a Chapter 11.
How did Blockbuster end?
Death.
Yes. All right. So there's some other ones that I candidly, I didn't even know, but just researching for our conversation. So there's a Chapter 9, a Chapter 12, and a Chapter 15. What are those?
So Chapter 9, the only one I think anyone would probably have heard of is the city of Detroit. A long time ago.
Okay.
So that's a municipal bankruptcy.
Okay.
When a city needs to file for bankruptcy, I think Fairfield, Alabama. There's a number of cities, but it's rare that a municipality has to file for bankruptcy. Chapter 12 is for family, farmers, and fishermen.
Okay.
And that's basically like a Chapter 13. Like I was saying, somebody with regular income can restructure their personal debts, but with the recognition that family, farmers, and fishermen have seasonal income. And so they don't have every month, but they have when they harvest their crop and sell it, then they get money for the rest of the year. And so it's a slightly different version of a Chapter 13.
Now, is that only applicable for that category? Because what about other businesses that have a lot of seasonality?
That's a great question. That chapter is specifically for those folks, right? That was a congressional lobbying for family farmers and fishermen so that they're not disadvantaged by the regular requirement to have prove monthly income. But you're right, it's a great point. There are people like realtors, for example.
Sure.
They get paid when a deal closes, right? And there's some wiggle room within a Chapter 13 to allow for those types of different income that's still considered regular, but not as predictable as a W-2 paycheck.
Got it. Okay. And then 15.
15 is foreign companies. So usually you'll have if there's a bankruptcy in Germany and they have German operations and U.S. operations, we put them together through Chapter 15.
Okay. So the companies that actually get through Chapter 11 to reorganize, what are the keys? Are there any specific traits or principles that they deploy or you see that help them be successful?
I think that's actually a really great question because, like, what is the secret sauce, right, to be successful in a bankruptcy? And I think it's a lot of different things. I would say being realistic with yourself, right? Having a business plan that is not pie in the sky, a dream, a hope, a prayer kind of business plan, a realistic pro forma and a business plan that makes sense to other people, right? Not just to you, but to other people, I think is right. But I would say that while I'd love to say it's having a great lawyer, I don't think it is. I think it's having a great accountant. I think it's having your financial house in order and really having a beat on the pulse of what is that data showing and where can just like you would with your own home, right? If you find yourself in financial distress as a family, you say, all right, let's sit down at the kitchen table and let's spread all this out and we're going to have to cut the yard man. love him, but he's going to have to go. We're going to cut our own grass. Right. Knowing where you can cut expenses, knowing where you can increase your margins, where you can increase revenue, what it's going to take. Is that marketing budget line item really worth it? Maybe the answer is yes, right? But let's think critically about it. That kind of attitude and being realistic about all those things, I think is the secret to success. But it's also being open and honest and transparent about all those things. Because if you come to me and you show me all those things and you show me the plan and I can follow it, I mean, I can follow accounting, spreadsheets, right? Yeah. You show me the profit and loss and you show me the pro forma and I'll be like, okay, well, yeah, maybe that could work.
Everything comes back to communication. But you mentioned, it's not the attorney. I refer to it as the golden triangle. Mm-hmm. You need a good attorney, you need a good accountant, and you need a good banker.
That's right.
If you're a small business owner.
I think that's absolutely right.
Now, I know you are a creditor attorney, but in terms of borrowers, how would a borrower, you're having conversations with the opposing counsel and trying to work through some issues, and how would a borrower determine what's the best strategy for them?
That's a great question. I think it's all dependent on what their situation is, right?
Okay. Sometimes such an attorney. It depends.
It depends.
That's a banker term also.
It depends on what, where you are and how bad things are, right? Do you just have one problem with one lender? Okay, that seems like a fairly solvable problem. Mm-hmm. Are you only one payment behind, or are you 22 payments behind and they've already filed foreclosure to, try to take your business away from you? Or do you have problems with your creditors, with your landlords, with all your vendors, your suppliers have cut you off? Where are you? And all of that kind of goes into the soup of, what do I do, right? Where can I go with this? How bad is this problem? How pervasive is this problem? Or do I have a problem with the fundamental structure of my business that I can fix or I can't fix?
Okay.
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
Am I Blockbuster? Right? Nobody's going to buy VHSs, right? Do I have a Blockbuster situation? Or do I just have a blip because a lot of times with small businesses, everything's going fine and then the principal gets sick, right? These are real life things that happen often. You're the heart of your business and you have a health event or someone in your family has a health event and you have to step away from the business and it suffers terribly. Sure. But that's over now and I'm ready to recover.
Right.
Or is it something that's more
So really,
serious?
Every case is different.
Totally different.
And I know we were just chatting a little bit, but I do want to point out, and you'll appreciate this as a creditor's attorney, we don't want your business. We don't want your business. We don't want your property. I've had, thankfully, I haven't had a conversation like that in years, but during the Great Recession, it was like, you just want my property. And I'm like, trust me.
That is such a common misconception. And because I represent banks, I say those words to borrowers and their attorneys all the time. This is not something my bank client wants to own. My landlord client does not want this space empty and back. We want you to succeed, right? But help us help you. Kind of conversations.
The conversation, that's important. And we probably should get into that at some point. But being so code driven, and I feel like every year there's a different change in the code, and it's something that I don't follow, but stumble across. And I'm like, I didn't know that was happening.
Sure.
Anything that's happening in the law and code that we should be aware of?
Yeah, good times. Bankruptcy law is changing. It changed in 2020.
Sexy bankruptcy
That's
law.
right. In 2020, the bankruptcy code changed slightly. There was an addition. And it was just kind of fortuitous timing with COVID because this has been in the works for a number of years, and it just passed in 2020. And it's called the Small Business Reorganization Act. That created what's called Subchapter 5 of Chapter 11. So it's like a subset of a Chapter 11 case dedicated to small businesses. Now, why would we need to do that?
Tell me more.
I'll tell you why. Because bankruptcy is really expensive. Chapter 11 is a really expensive proposition.
Sure.
It is a six-figure proposition for most debtors, right? To go into, get through, and come out of a Chapter 11. And most small businesses can't afford that. It also has a lot of requirements. And so a lot of small businesses were either unable to even file a Chapter 11, so they just had to shut down, right? Or they could get in, but they could never get out because the requirements and the obligations of the debtor were so much that it wasn't practical for a small business debtor to do all the reporting that's required and put together all these plans. And so the Small Business Reorganization Act is meant specifically to alleviate that burden, to allow small businesses to have an easier time getting in and getting out of Chapter 11. That was enacted in 2020. President Biden, that has a debt threshold. It's right now it's $3 million and change or less in debt. Okay, so you have to qualify for it.
So it's not based on revenue size. It's based on
It's
debt.
based on debt.
Okay.
And you have to qualify for it, right? So if you have debt under $3 million, and it's a little bit more than $3 million, it goes up every year. There's like an adjustment.
Okay.
Then you can qualify. During COVID, with the CARES Act 1 and 2, President Biden temporarily increased that debt limit to $7.5 million.
Okay.
So we saw a big wave right in 2020 and then the following couple years of these small business reorganizations because the debt limit was temporarily increased. Now it's back down.
Okay, so it's sunset.
Now it's back at sunset and it's back down to $3 million and change.
Okay. How does someone determine an approach? Should I do a workout? So what we refer to in banking is, you're working with your banker trying to find another solution or any other type of lender, or go to a bankruptcy.
Yeah, I think that's the $1 million question, right? I think it's a lot easier to do a workout if you're my only problem.
Okay.
Right? If I have a problem with you and you're my only problem and otherwise life is good, a workout makes great sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say if you can avoid a bankruptcy, that's the best thing for everybody, right?
Okay.
It's not for the faint of heart.
Right.
But if you have a problem with Bank of Tampa and you have a problem with your landlord and you have a problem with your vendor and you have a problem with this other line of credit and you have a problem over here, pretend you're an octopus, right? If you have 8 arms and you have 5 problems with 5 of your arms, fixing one is great, because you have one more that you can use, but it's still not, you're not out of the hospital.
Right.
You still have problems.
Have you used that one before?
Never used that one before.
Good.
No, that one's
That's
going to
good on the fly.
So a workout is, I think, a very viable option for debtors who have few problems to solve.
So I guess what is the biggest drawback of pursuing a bankruptcy? Because I almost can think, okay, and not knowing everyone's situation is different. Totally understand and respect that. But if you're a smaller company, Subchapter 5 is available. To me, it seems like, okay, I'll go that route and make life easier for me versus trying to work through any situation I have with my lender. So, I mean, what advantages are there to bankruptcies or downside?
Sure. I think that it levels the playing field a little bit for debtors, right? I think sometimes when you're in default with a loan, a debtor feels like they don't have any leverage and they don't have any options but to do whatever the lender says, whether that's possible or not, because sometimes lenders will ask for things that are not possible to accomplish.
How dare you? Never. We're always very reasonable.
I'm the one asking, so I get it, right?
You know what's behind the curtain.
And that goes down to a whole other issue of like disclosure, right? Because banks only know what you tell, in terms of financial disclosure, we only know what you tell us.
Yes.
So if you don't tell us the real realities of things, then we'll ask you for something that's not possible. And that happens often.
And I want to talk about that because it is amazing that, you get into a challenging situation with someone and they're behind in their payments and you try to put out the olive branch. By the way, everybody is different. Some people are fantastic. But people act very interesting under duress and stress. And a lot of folks just don't want to have a conversation or they just don't want to disclose anything.
That's right.
Let me see your financials and let's work through a solution together. I'm not going to give you my tax returns. I'm not going to give you my financials. You're never going to see my personal financial statement. It's like, okay, well, this is a non-starter.
Short conversation then.
Right.
And that happens often. I think that's human nature, right? I think when there are problems, it's this fight or flight instinct kicks in, whether it's in your personal life or in your business life. It's just human nature. You have this instinct to fight or to flee. And I think that a natural human reaction is avoidance. And
it'll all just go away.
And I call it the ostrich syndrome,
yeah, totally,
right? You just stick your head in the sand and hope that it'll just go away if you ignore it. And it happens all the time. And it's really the worst thing that I think a borrower can do, right?
Absolutely.
Because then those problems metastasize into you had one problem and now you have three problems. And your one problem was a little problem and now it's a big problem. And then it becomes so overwhelming for them that they don't have these workout options. They've missed the window to really work something out and avoid a bankruptcy, and so they have to file a bankruptcy. And sometimes they'll file it at the very last minute, right before a foreclosure sale. That happens very often, right before the day before a big hearing in a case to get a receiver appointed or something like that. And that works against the debtors in the long run because it sours the relationship.
Sure.
And when you have a loan, especially a long-term loan, especially a loan secured by real estate or all the business assets, whether you like it or not, you're kind of in a marriage with that person.
Right.
Yes. And so you have to treat the relationship like you would any other relationship that is a long-term relationship. And souring that relationship from the beginning is not the best way to get out, at the end to be successful.
Great advice. You're hearing it. Have a conversation.
Have a conversation.
Keep the lines of communication open.
Yeah.
So you mentioned timing and filing at the very last minute. Is there an ideal time? Does timing matter outside of just, filing at the last minute and impacting kind of that trust relationship?
So I would say yes, filing. I mean, timing matters. Just like everything in life, timing matters, right? The timing is different for every business and every situation. But I guess I would say that what's more important than the timing is the approach, right? Filing a last-minute bankruptcy case with no information, kind of like a bare bones, let's just stop this situation, whatever X is happening tomorrow, let's stop X, is going to greatly reduce your chance of success versus I have 3 years of tax returns. I filed all my tax returns. Here's my profit and loss statements. Here's my balance sheet statements. I've now created a pro forma for the next 6 months. And here I've identified what my problems are, and here's my plan to fix them. And that has a much greater chance of success, right? Because I have a plan. I am organized. I have my financial house in order. Yes, we have had some bumps in the road, but here's how we're going to fix those things. That's a lot more attractive to a lender, to a judge, to everyone than you kind of running with your hair on fire to bankruptcy court, be like, whew, make him stop. That's not the solution. That's just, and I think that's a common misconception.
We need another animal analogy.
I know, we're going to come up with another one.
Ostrich.
I'll get you a penguin in there soon.
We need
Don't
one
worry.
more before the end of this. But so from a creditor standpoint, what is the advantage of us as a lender working through a workout versus, and I think you probably already answered this, but forcing someone into bankruptcy? Is there a strategy there that can be employed?
Sure. I think that, when you look at the statistics of how many Chapter 11 cases result in true reorganizations, it's quite few. A lot of them wind up in liquidations. Okay. Even if they came in as a reorganization,
they don't always succeed in their reorganization.
That's a little disappointing. I mean, I know. I'm sorry, I'm asking you. It's not a fair question off the top of your head, but a percentage.
I don't have a percentage to tell you. It's just kind of a sense that I've had. I've been doing this, almost 20 years, and I wish that there were more that truly are able to reorganize. But I think a common misconception is bankruptcy is going to solve my problems. Not really, right? Bankruptcy is moving your problems. We're consolidating your problems, but you still have to solve them in a bankruptcy. And if you still have those fundamental problems with your business model, those aren't going to go away because you filed a bankruptcy. They kind of peel back the like the curtain comes back and then everybody looks and says, well, this isn't a viable business. You're Blockbuster. Nobody's buying VHSs. This business isn't viable. You have to, in bankruptcy, to come out of it with a plan, you have to prove that the business model that you're proposing is feasible.
Makes sense. You had mentioned costs. So 6 figures. Is that pretty much the standard?
Not in a small business reorganization case, right? A subchapter 5 case, the costs are much less. But in a traditional Chapter 11, it's different all over the country, right? But I'm just talking about in Tampa Bay, in the Middle District of Florida, Southern District of Florida, a bankruptcy the all-in number is going to be probably 6 figures to get through.
Okay. And I do want to touch on, and I think I glossed over it a little bit, but because I understand what full disclosure is.
Yeah.
How would you explain that to
Well, that is a great question because it does mean different things to different people, right? I think full disclosure is I give a standard package of what I request and what my lender clients request and sometimes what my landlord clients request, right? Which is 3 years of tax returns. You have to be current on your tax returns. A lot of people aren't. 3 years of profit and loss statements. Okay. 3 years of balance sheet statements and year to date, right? And then I ask for a pro forma because if a debtor is not in a position to put together a pro forma, that says a lot. Right? About the viability of any deal going forward. But then the deals can be very different. Workouts can look like lots of different things, right? The workout can be, okay, you sell the building, you move, and you lease a much smaller space because your business shifted and you no longer, because of consumer purchasing or whatever your buyer is buying, you don't need all this space, right? So let's sell the building. Let's pay down the loan. Let's get you some money to go move your operation to a smaller location. That could be one workout, right? Another workout could be, okay, how about you pay interest only on this loan for a short period of time to get back on your feet because your wife had a health event or your husband had a health event and you need some time to recover from that, and then we'll just go back to paying the loan as normal. The workout can be anything the parties will agree to.
There's a wide range. I think bankruptcy is one of those areas they're misunderstood. Any misconceptions that are standard that you just kind of want to put to rest right now? Let everybody know.
I think
bankruptcy attorneys are good people.
We're not as nerdy as you think we are. I don't know. No, I think that the biggest misconception is on the side of the debtor, that they think that filing a bankruptcy without much thought to it is going to solve problems. It doesn't solve problems. It moves problems. It brings all the problems to the same place. Okay. But it's not in and of itself is not a solution. Unless, I guess, if you're filing a like Chapter 7 and it's liquidation and you're done. Right. But then again, that doesn't always solve people's problems because one thing that as a creditor's lawyer I love about bankruptcy is that it is a forum for everyone to look backwards, look at everything that has come into the bankruptcy, but also look backwards for a period of time and put all of those transactions under a microscope. So sometimes debtors don't really want what they did 2 years ago with all the money to come to light and be under the microscope, or they don't think it will.
Different entities,
right? Yeah. Or they don't think it will, right. And so I think that's the biggest misconception is like, okay, I'm getting out of this. I'm solving this problem by filing this paper, and it's not at all that.
What about student loans? And again, I know you're commercial, but a lot of people have student loans, ridiculous amounts of student loans. And there was a point in time where which they couldn't enter those into bankruptcy. Has that changed? Has that shifted, or is it still?
No, it's still student loan debt is still non-dischargeable.
That's bananas.
Say that again.
It's bananas.
It is
Doesn't make any
bananas.
sense.
It is. That is kind of a call your congressman issue,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Because I know that it has over time, really been difficult for a lot of people. There is a very slim exception where a student loan could be dischargeable, but I've seen it applied so sparingly. For example, when someone is now disabled
Okay.
and they're unable to perform any work in the area that they got their degree in, then very small exceptions to those rules. I mean, President Biden did forgive some, student loans, but that was totally outside the context of bankruptcy.
Yes.
And I know there have been programs that actually the bankruptcy courts have put together to help try to modify, these student loans to make them more reasonable because there's not a great solution for those situations.
Yeah, and I'm probably a rabbit hole we don't need to go down, but to me, forgiveness was not the right course of action. I mean, there's many people that can forgive it. There's many people who have since paid off their student loans, even though it was very difficult and there were sacrifices that needed to be made. I'm sure, like an attorney, I'm sure you probably have some student loans out there. However, looking at bankruptcy, maybe reviewing degree options and seeing, fundamentally like what's a viable career path with this degree and aligning those more appropriately. But no, I won't make you go down
We
that
could
hole.
have a whole series of podcasts on my thoughts on student loans. We'll leave that for another time.
We'll bring you back for a student loan podcast. Is there anything that's changing in bankruptcy laws or in discussion?
I wouldn't say that there's a lot. There was an attempt to keep that debt threshold of $7.5 million for small businesses, make it permanent, but that failed in the legislature. I would say there's not really a lot of legislative things on the horizon, but I do think that there's a lot of economic forces and confluence, if you can even use that word, that is likely coming in the near future that will, depending on how they work out, either push more people into bankruptcy or help more people stay out of bankruptcy. I mean, just to name a few, I think this FTC ban on competition, the rule, it's held up right now. I mean, if it were to pass, that would change the landscape for a lot of industries,
Absolutely.
right? If you're able to freely compete with your prior company, right, that's going to create a lot of different challenges and opportunities, I guess, depending on how you look at it and what side you're on of that. What President Trump will do related to trade, free trade with China. I mean, we get a lot of products from there, right? If that is changed, that will have a trickle-down effect on all of our businesses in different ways and in certain industries more than others.
Yeah, that's one of those unintended consequences. Like, we can sit here and kind of pontificate. We have no idea. We can make a guess at what industries will be impacted.
Sure, we have no idea.
There'll be many others that we couldn't see it.
And that's why what I do is never dull, right? Because it is industry agnostic. It is a financial, kind of math problem, accounting problem that I find, and it can happen to just as easily, student housing as it can to a hotel, as it can to, I had a mulch operation the other day, it's just the issues can be pervasive throughout the industries, and interest rates is one of those things, right? That will affect, whether the Fed makes another reduction or not, and how big that reduction is will have a major impact on businesses and their ability to, access capital going forward. So all of those things, they're not legislative necessarily, but they are factors that will ultimately influence all of us all over the U.S. and particularly here. I think Tampa is a particularly interesting market because we are still considered really a tertiary market going towards secondary market. but we do have a lot of small businesses.
We do.
Right? So we have one of the highest rates of filing of these Small Business Reorganization Act cases in the country because of where we are, kind of the size of the businesses in our market.
That's fascinating.
It is interesting, right? Yeah.
As a banker, sometimes I feel, especially in a workout situation, I mean, we're counselors, we're therapists. Can you talk a little bit about just maybe the emotional consequences and the fallout, for lack of a better term, that sometimes folks go through when they're contemplating or even going through a bankruptcy?
Sure. I don't think that the emotional aspect of being in financial distress can be discounted. It is incredibly difficult. Whether you are the CEO of a major company or you are the president, CEO, treasurer, secretary of a small business, the emotional stress of not being able to succeed financially is incredibly stressful and difficult. Talking about a small business, because I think that is where the most stress comes from. Small businesses are typically what fuels the whole family, right? Because let's say one spouse works in the business, the other spouse does the books, the kids work on the weekends at the retail establishment, right? That business provides the salaries for both parents in a family with small children. If that business is not financially succeeding, it puts a strain on the marriage. It puts a strain on the children. It puts a strain on the grandparents. They borrow money from other family members to try to prop up the business. And there's a lot of guilt and there's a lot of pressure on people. And there is, again, this fight or flight instinct, right? I can't talk to my spouse about it because everybody's depending on me. And I think
that goes into that guilt and shame.
Yes,
right?
It's very difficult. But, the more, just like everything, if you don't attack it head on, it just gets worse. And I think that's where it's, like you said, talking to your banker, talking to your attorney, talking to your accountant about how do we solve this problem, being open and honest about the fact that there is a problem. Listen, America's the land of opportunity, right? Bankruptcy is here. A lot of countries don't have this option, right?
Yeah.
Other countries, there are debtors' prisons, right? This is the land of opportunity, and it's the bankruptcy system gives the honest but unfortunate debtor a fresh start and an ability to live out the American dream again.
Yes.
Right? Walt Disney filed for bankruptcy.
Yeah.
President Trump has filed a number of his businesses for bankruptcy, right? There's plenty of people who have failed and dusted themselves off and succeeded in the next endeavor. And that is what I think makes the bankruptcy process really special and unique.
I think we took it from a dark place to a positive place. That's a good place to end it. So people that need your expertise, how can they find you, Stephanie?
I've been in the same place for 17 years now. I'm not going anywhere. You can Google me, but you can also find me at trenam.com.
Stephanie, thank you for coming on Money Market.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you have a question or future show idea or would like to be a sponsor, you can send us a message at moneymarket@bankoftampa.com or find us on LinkedIn, X, Facebook, and on Instagram at Bank of Tampa, and of course online at bankoftampa.com. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for subscribing, and we'll see you around in the Money Market.